topic today, the eye of the mystic, the topic that I chose. And any idea how if when somebody says the word mystic, what comes to mind?
Someone like Thomas Merton, who lived in a cave and just meditated and stayed away from civilization. That's
That's your impression.
Yeah, he's the only one I know.
He's certainly one of the great mystics of, I guess, the 19th and 20th century, right? Yeah. Wonderful teacher, writer.
Is he a Jesuit?
I believe Thomas Merton started as a Catholic.
As a priest?
As a Catholic priest, yeah. And he studied Zen, Buddhism, with Thich Nhat Hanh.
He studied with Thich Nhat Hanh?
Yeah, and Thich Nhat Hanh studied with Thomas Merton. Am I getting this confused with another Christian? I think I'm getting that confused with another priest. I'll have to go back and research that. Yeah, sorry, I might be getting that confused. But Thomas Merton, yes, wonderful teacher, wonderful writer, very insightful. Similar concept?
Yeah, definitely. Someone who's having more of a spiritual experience than religious. Who's had, experiences with enlightenment.
Yeah, that's both very accurate. The way I've decided to define a mystic for this talk's purpose is somebody who's just more evolved as a human being spiritually. What that means, or the way I think of it, is somebody who's more inclusive. And if you think of how evolution works in nature, atoms become molecules, become cells, always including more and more. As nature, as atoms become molecules, become cells, become living beings, and so forth like that. It's always this expansive, transcending and including process. So the mystic transcends the typical human experience, but also includes it. Even though Thomas Merton may have lived secluded in a cave, I think the reason why he decided to write down what he understood, and he did teach some people, he did that, I believe, out of compassion for the human race. I think that's one of the primary qualities of a mystic, is this natural compassion that seems to flow. So we're going to take a look at that as well. I wrote down a couple of things that I wanted to read. You may know this quote already, but if you don't, that's good too. So I won't tell you who wrote it until after. A human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe. A part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Beautiful writing.
What was the last one you said? The last.
Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Any idea who might have written those very mystic words? It's Albert Einstein. Yeah. Beautiful, right? Yeah. But his science the whole relativity theory is really pointing at that. E equals mc squared.
So you consider him a mystic?
Absolutely.
But he's never known for that.
No, I know. He spoke.
I thought it was Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah, it could have been, right? Absolutely. Could have been. Right out of the same spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he had tremendous insight into the human condition and spoke against violence and war in many occasions, the need for stronger education, things like that. And particularly in this statement, really a cry for a stronger sense of compassion, right? Yeah, and to recognize that we're all one. But that's what his E equals mc squared pointed at, is that we're all matter, and just vibrating at different frequencies. Energy. Yeah. All matter is energy. Yeah, just vibrating differently. And then I wanted to read something that I wrote, if you don't mind. If you would indulge me. This is from my book, and I subtitled the talk, Love is the Absence of Judgment, Fear is the Absence of Love. That's a very mystic teaching. I believe the first teacher that I saw that written by was Ram Dass, one of the great mystic teachers of the present day and of the 20th century as well. But it's been quoted and written in many places by many mystics. So I used it as a meditation device for a couple of years, almost like a mantra. And this is what I wrote when I finished those years of practice using that phrase. Love is the absence of judgment. Fear is the absence of love.
Fear is not
The absence of love. These two sentences have been a mantra for my practice for the past year or so. The more I meditate on these phrases, the deeper they seem to reach. The love that is being referred to here could be a romantic love. Certainly a romance free from judgment would be ideal. But perhaps this absence of judgment could be applied to our every relationship, applied to our relationship with life itself. What would it feel like? What would life feel like if we applied this type of love to whatever form arose in the present moment? Fear is the absence of love. This may also be applied to a romantic love. For certain, the times and moments that I've experienced where I feared my partner, my love for them was greatly eclipsed. But what about applying this fearlessness to our relationships with life itself? Our relationship to the present moment? If there is a fear of an experience which is arising, it seems very difficult to love the form that is presented in that experience. The form which we are fearing. Perhaps then the answer is that we must welcome in the fear and the form together, become comfortable with our fear, rather than falling into some sort of reactive pattern so that we somehow dissociate from our fear and numb out so we don't feel it. Love so that the two become one. Love that dissolves seer and seen into one experience. Most people have had a taste of this type of love, looking at a beautiful sunset, listening to an outstanding piece of music, or in the rapturous height of lovemaking. We fall out of the judging mind and the fearful mind. We lose thought entirely and unite with the very experience itself. No judgment, no fear. Fear and judgment separate us from our life. If we can rest in the silence that exists prior to that fear and prior to that judgment, then love arises spontaneously in each moment, naturally, like water cascading from a brook. So the challenge then becomes, can we embrace the present moment? Not just the moments that seem agreeable to our wants, needs, desires, or personal agendas. No, embracing the present moment regardless of the forms contained within it. Are we brave enough to trust that whatever we're experiencing is as it should be, simply because the universe is as it should be? Fear is the absence of love. So then let fear drop away. Fear of pain, fear of heartache, fear of loneliness, fear of not being enough, fear of non-existence. Whatever form fear takes for you, and how do we let that fear drop? By welcoming in the fear with open arms and a loving, compassionate heart. Holding the fear the way a mother holds a newborn baby in her arms. And resting right there, resting in the fear. So then there's no fear and no judgment. The observer and the observed, the experiencer and the experienced, the seer and the scenery unite in a fearless union of love. Challenging, though. So yeah, welcoming that fear, or as we did in the retreat, resting in whatever's arising. It's really what I was pointing to there, I think. Is that being able to rest in the present moment, and there's no struggle. So that's kind of a mystic teaching that came to me somehow while I was writing.
It's kind of related to, I did a video today. You're asking what I did today. Rather than go to the city pound, I did a video about how to deal with holidays with least amount of stress.
Yeah.
And the key to it was to not take anything personally, which I think is similar to that. Because instead of reacting to what's coming at you, you're resting with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because often we react out of fear or out of hurt. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we take things personally when we feel somehow threatened or less than what's arising in the present moment. We can react in that way, in a negative way, or have that reaction. The reaction's okay too, but then being able to rest without yelling or punching somebody out, experiencing whatever arises in that moment. It's never too late to come to presence, that's the good news. So I like, I'll give an example of that. So, say like I go to a concert, a classical music concert. And, I'm sitting, I bought some really expensive tickets maybe, I'm sitting close to the stage and the orchestra's tuning up. The conductor taps the music stand and he launches the orchestra into the piece. And just as that happens, a couple behind me start talking, right? So of course, the natural, or the reaction that would seem appropriate would be anger, right, in that moment. And that's what happens, I think, would happen for most people without a meditation practice or a mystic practice. They might get this anger and then they might yell at the person or whatever. But with a practice, not any type of spiritual practice, but some spiritual practice of becoming in the present moment more fully, you start to notice a space between the feeling tone, that instance which brought this feeling into my body in which I respond to anger with, Now there's a space there. So the conversation happens and I feel a reaction in my body, but now I can choose how I want to respond to that. But I can choose to be angry, I can choose to be amused, I can choose to look for a different seat, I can choose to ask them to not talk while the music is playing. So there are all these options now. It's not just, it becomes not a knee-jerk reaction. It's not just like they're talking, I turn around and say, hey, shut up, what are you thinking, or something like that, There's all these options. And I think absolutely that plays into that, It's a great practice around holiday time. Ram Dass, the mystic that I had mentioned, has a great phrase that it's all on Instagram now. This time of year, if you think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
Is that from him?
Yeah.
Go spend with your family.
Yeah, go spend a week with your family if you think you're so enlightened. Yeah.
During Thanksgiving.
Anytime. And because there's many reasons.
Triggers, yeah.
There's lots of triggers. If anybody knows your triggers, it's them.
Family.
And not only that, but what I found when I spend time with my family, if you're watching this, hi. If you're watching, hi. Is that because I left home to go to college when I was 18, and I really haven't been back that often since I was 18. So they still see me as that in that maturity level, and they react and respond and communicate with me in that way. And it's very challenging not to regress. I have to be very, very present, to remind myself that I'm not an 18-year-old, that I'm 45 and I am a responsible adult who's capable of making my own choices, and blah 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 blah, and to remind myself that, and not to react and say that out loud to them in a negative way, just to be like, okay, that's how they see me, I'm a much different person now, and that somehow they know me. It's very normal. I think it happens with most people. It's very normal, but that's why I think it requires extra presence to be around people who you grew up with, or your family, and things like that. Especially if you spent most of your adult years apart, because then they still remember you and see you and communicate with you in that childlike way. So yeah, it's challenging.
I read an article about similar to that, like when family members go home for the holidays. So it's about this particular woman. Ever since she was a kid, she was always assigned to do the dishwashing. So even though she's in her 30s, so she just finally put her foot down. She wouldn't do it anymore.
I'm done.
Yeah. But you're right, because families, parents especially, and even your siblings, they all expect the same thing when you were a kid.
Yeah.
That you would still do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I notice it very much. Yeah, go to visit my family. It always happens. It always comes up. Yeah, it's interesting. And once you recognize it, it's very interesting to just watch it, to kind of be amused by it. They don't understand. It's unfortunate. I feel kind of bad for them, because as the adult that I am now, I have many more gifts to offer them, and they aren't receiving those gifts. They still see me as an 18-year-old musician, neither of which I am anymore, or identify as.
They'll visit you in 5 minutes.
I hope they will.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. Yeah, they can see me.
Meditation.
No, my sister has gotten one of my meditation videos and has been using that. So I think she's the first of my family to actually be open to it.
They're in Brooklyn.
No, they're in Atlanta, Georgia, and Delaware. My brother lives in Delaware. I don't have any family in New York anymore. Just a lot of friends. So speaking of, shall we continue? Yeah, I'll just continue with what I prepared here. I just mentioned identifications. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because the mystic becomes a mystic by shedding their identifications, by dropping who they are on their passport, who they've grown up to think they are. They lose one by one these identifications. And that's how that wholeness arises. In many spiritual traditions, it's thought that that wholeness is always there. It's always with us all the time. But we are so identified with slivers of that wholeness that that's how we live our life, through that sliver, through this sliver. You know, I'm a musician, I'm an entertainer, I'm a poet, I'm a teacher, I'm a this, I'm a that, a mother, a father, a husband, a wife. And so we cut up that wholeness into these pieces, and we live our life through those pieces rather than experiencing the whole. So you can kind of feel that or get a sense of that whenever somebody asks you who you are. Or you can even, in the silence of meditation, you can ask that question, who am I? And when we ask that question, what we're really doing essentially is drawing a line in that wholeness. And on one side of the line are all the qualities that we identify with. Like I was just saying, I'm a lawyer, I'm a husband, a wife, I'm in this kind of relationship, I do this or that, whatever. Those identifications are in that, on that side. Right. Yeah, the external world, the external reality. And then on the other side is, if you like that external, that internal, is the internal world. Or, well, I'm going to go back, I'm going to retract that statement. Both sides of the line are external. It's just one side are the qualities we possess, or we feel we possess, or we identify with. The other side are the qualities we feel we don't possess, that don't describe us, that aren't who we are. Now, what the mystic has come to realize is that line is actually self-perpetuated or self-drawn. And we can move that line. We can redraw the map of our soul, if you will, so that we can include more or exclude more as the situation dictates. If we're living in the present moment, we can identify with being whatever it is that serves the present moment. So if
not external. Not external. I can't say, okay, from now on I'm Japanese, or I have a Japanese passport.
Well, you could get a citizenship and make steps towards that, if that was something you desired, you know. So that could be something you could shift, and things like that. So that line is not easily redrawn, but it can be redrawn moment to moment in some cases, or some cases like that it might take years to do. But we can shift our identity as our life unfolds. So why is that important? Well, when we can do that, a greater sense of freedom arises. Because when we recognize that those identifications are limiting in many ways. For example, if I identify as a musician, then all of a sudden I'm limited to the type of employment that I can seek. I might limit my free time to hours of practicing every day. I might restrict my enjoyment of listening to music, to certain styles of music. I might prefer to wear certain clothing because I identify myself as a musician, you know, like rock and roll clothing or whatever, or things like that. So that becomes very limiting because there may be, and what I found in my own case, is that there are many other forms of employment that I enjoy. And when I stopped identifying as a jazz musician, I realized that there's many other styles of music that I really love, that I thought I hated, you know, because I was, you know, a very purist jazz musician. Now I can meditate instead of going to practice, which I prefer. I learned that I actually prefer to meditate, to sit in silence, than to play my instrument. And it's all because I was able to redraw that line. Another common identification is a religion, right? Many people identify with a particular religion. So if I identify myself as being a Buddhist, for example, which I used to, then all of a sudden I would have to either meditate or chant a Buddhist sutra rather than maybe do a centering prayer, which might help me more in my life circumstances, right? But I wouldn't know about that centering prayer because I've been identified as a Buddhist. Or I might not be able to practice a particular Hindu practice or a particular Kabbalah practice or whatever. Any sort of healing practice which might be more appropriate for me. But because I've trapped myself in that box through those identifications, now I'm stuck in that box. And again, to bring it back to Albert Einstein, he made a great statement once. The thoughts that free us today will enslave us tomorrow. The thoughts that free us today will enslave us tomorrow. Just that, how we, when we grow, we have these thoughts of I want to be this or I want to be that. It's natural. As we grow into adulthood, our ego searches for these identifications to cling on to, so we feel that we're bigger or larger. And that all egos go through that phase. And so those thoughts, as Einstein calls it, those identifications at that young age seem very freeing, because now we're much larger than we feel we are as an adolescent. But then 20 years down the road, we're stuck in those places that at 18 felt so wonderful. So the mystic points to the idea that we don't have to do that. We can continue that whole growing process by continually disidentifying with wherever we are, not identifying with the name in our passport or our occupation, our gender, our body type, because all of those are very limiting in a way. You know, gender is limiting because we buy into the gender stereotypes. So if we identify ourselves with being a man, for my example, or being women, then you're easily susceptible to fall into the stereotypes of the culture that you've been brought in, like that. So the idea there is to bring your identification back, I'll get to more of this in a minute, into the open, clear space where all of that arises. Then you identify with awareness itself, which has no gender. And so you're free from the cultural implications of any culture or any gender. Free to be who you truly are. And that's what all of the mystics and seers and sages of today and yesterday have all pointed at, is that we are nothing that we can see, taste, touch, feel, hear is what we are, truly. But we're the space which allows all of that. We are the awareness which allows all of that to arise. You can kind of get a sense of that now if you just look around the room. You look at the objects in the room, the lights, the plants, whatever's in front of you, And you know that you're not those objects, right? That's pretty clear. But then you can start to bring that even closer. You can start to feel your body sensations, right? And because you can feel those, you know you're not those. Because according to the mystic, the true self, the true you, is the one who's feeling, the space which allows those feelings to arise. But we do identify with feelings, with emotions. Often we identify with our emotions. I am so angry, I am so sad, I am so happy, I am so whatever. So, but by recognizing that we are not those emotions, but we're the space which allows that emotion to arise, we can begin to transcend those emotions, free ourselves. Or you can do the same with sound. That's more clear than the emotions, right? You hear a sound, the air conditioning, the sound of my voice, the sound of the traffic. And because they're arising in your aural field, you are that space. You are that space of the aural field. You are the space which allows all of those sounds to come and go, according to the mystics. And so we go back and back and back. In the Hindu practice, it's Sat Pham Sat, I think they call it. I am not this, I am not that, I am not this, I am not that. The constant practice of disidentifying. So anything you can see, touch, feel, taste, hear is not what you truly are. But again, the space which allows all of that to arise.
Do you consider yourself a mystic?
I try not to consider myself anything at all, actually, which comes back to the identification or disidentification.
But then you identify other people as mystics.
Yeah, and I think that's how it works. I think it has to work that way.
So what's the difference between you and them?
It's not for me to say. Yeah. There's a great Zen phrase, or a phrase from the Zen tradition. I polish my stone, or I practice as deeply as I can, planting seeds. The fruit from the tree is not for me to taste, or for me to say how sweet it is. It's for others to say. Like that. And I really try to, not even try, that's something that has always stuck with me. And yeah, so yeah. But I'd be honored to be considered such. I think it would be an honor. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the reason why it's so foreign to us, continuing with what I have written, is because we, again, we identify with the things within that space. Things that are arising. And traditionally in Buddhism that's called dukkha, or early Buddhism or Hinduism it's known as samsara. In Christianity it's called original sin. But that separation, that what Einstein said, the separation from the wholeness, that optical delusion, returning to that phrase, we have that mistaken identity. We mistake ourselves for being whatever it is that arises, rather than that wholeness, that open, clear, spacious awareness. And if we rest very deeply, we can sense that wholeness coming through us. It shines through us. In our eyes, that light of awareness comes through our eyes, our speech, our chakras, yet life energy that breathes through every sentient being. And for me, the great insight of the mystics was recognizing that that light that shines through me also shines through you. And it's the same light. It's that same awareness. There's not two there. It's just one awareness that's shining through this particular body at this particular time. And if you like, you can say that I'm also shining through you. And I shine through the stray cats on the street. And I shine through the homeless. And I shine through the criminals. And I shine through the victims of their crimes. And I shine through the warmongers. And I shine through the soldiers. And we just continue to shine in that way, that light, that radiance. And all of the ills of today and yesterday all really stem from that misidentification, that unfortunate mistaken identity with the slivers of reality. If we could really see that constant, that we are all this light, war would be such a foreign thing. How could there be war? It would be so absurd. Because war is really the murder of another group of human beings in support of an idea, in support of a misidentification. So if we were able to really see that there would be no crime or murder, not because it was illegal, but it would just be like, what? I did what? Why would we do that? You know, because we would recognize ourselves in the other constantly. And that goes, I think, back to the writing that I wrote, that love so that the two become one. That actually comes from a Christian gospel, that phrase. Love so that the two become one.
It's also a Spice Girls song.
Is it?
Really?
Oh,
wow.
no.
Okay, Spice Girls.
Well, I'll have to check that out. I haven't heard that. No, it's in the Gospel of St. Thomas, where Jesus says, love so that seer and scenery become one, or so that the two become one. There's no separation.
But Chris, like, I'm not being political, but like what's happening in America now,
Yeah.
it seems to be getting worse and worse
I
and
know.
worse. So I don't know how that could happen.
Yeah.
That why?
I have a
why
theory.
Did American people make this happen?
Well, it's not only America. It's a worldwide trend towards darkness, if you will, or and it is because of all of we're stuck. We seem to be stuck in this state of arrested development as human beings. And I think it is just a state, and I think we will grow beyond it eventually. I'll just continue before, and then I'll let, because I really do want to address that, because it's an important.
It's also part of my fear. Because I still go back even though I'm a retiree, I live in the Philippines now, I still go back every year. But, and I know it's still far away because I usually go to spend time. But now I have a strong fear of returning.
Yeah, I do too. I understand.
Because even though I'm an American, I'm still considered brown, and racism has been, it's way up, and being attacked for being of a different color, it went up in subways, in the street. So I fear that.
It's awful, I know. Yeah, and I think that I do believe that the human spirit is evolving. And I think we will grow beyond this dark time. I don't think it's possible to say when or to put a timeline
Is
on
it
it.
when Trump is out of the office?
It depends. And I think Trump is I think the image that Trump has brought forth is, in a way, can be a great healing device, because now the world sees the illnesses in no unforgiving terms, where we know that this is what's wrong with the human race.
This is what's wrong here.
With the human race. And we're being forced to see it. Whereas before, we were very able to sweep it under the carpet, very gently tuck it away. Oh, we don't want to deal with that. Nobody wants to talk about that. But now, the gift of Trump is actually bringing these conversations to the table.
But that's not his.
That's not the end game. That's not that, and that is, I understand, that is the silver lining in a very, very dark, what could be a very dark epic in the human species, in the evolution of the human species. But some more of the silver lining is that compared to the epic from maybe the 10th century to the 17th century, we're doing much better. I mean, during those hundreds of years, 60% of human beings were killed by other human beings. Over half. That's astronomical. Right now it's about 2 to 5%. It's really good comparing, you know, in comparison to those dark ages we went through. So we have come a long way, and I think there are some mystics. The one who I'm thinking of right now, his name is Ken Wilber, one of my favorite writers, who has this theory that we've evolved, the evolution of human beings going from caveman to God. And we're about halfway there, according to his writings. And I kind of subscribe to that idea. And so we still have another halfway to go. So if you think about that, that's almost pretty accurate, you know. Now, and these epics don't go in a single straight line. It's like the stock market, if you'll excuse the analogy. You know, it rises and falls, but it does go up gradually, but there is this rise and fall that will happen. And I think we are in a decline right now. Now, I've written a couple of articles on this topic, so it's good that you mention it. And I'll address this the way I did in those articles, and you can check them out on my website later if you wish. The problem in the world politics right now, particularly in Europe and America, is that there's a lot of ego involved. And so, in this, not only now, but you can see it very clearly in the 60s, when the Vietnam protests were going on, that turned very violent and very adamant and very dogmatic. And so that worked. It put an end to the Vietnam War, and the pendulum shifted to the left. But that's the problem, is that there is a pendulum, and the pendulum will continue to shift back and forth as long as the politics are ego-driven. The ego, the problem is that we identify, again, bringing that back to the identification, we identify with our beliefs very strongly. In fact, when somebody has an opposing belief, particularly in the States right now, we feel attacked personally, right? It's almost as if somebody physically attacks us, right? And the people who have the opposing beliefs feel the same attack. When we debate with them, they feel so personally attached to their belief systems that they feel physically hurt. So the discussion is very ego-driven, and that's what keeps the pendulum swinging back and forth. Now, if we can somehow recognize that these beliefs are not who we are, That it's just ideas that are coming and going all of the time, coming and going. And we cling very hard to the ones that we feel speak our truth. But it's still just a belief system. And when we're on our deathbed, that belief system will fade very quickly. And it seems very trivial at that point, right? So the idea, I think, is to really recognize that the people who oppose or have opposing views of us, or oppose the ideas that we have with their opposing ideas, to recognize that to see our spirit shining through them. It's very difficult when it's a racially driven idea and it's hurting us. I know, that's very difficult, but I think that's what Jesus was pointing to when he said, turn the other cheek.
That's hard.
It's very, very challenging. It's very, very challenging. But that is one way. I can't say it's the only way, but it's the one way. It is a one way that will allow that pendulum to stop swinging. And so we can come together and begin to heal as a race, as a whole, as a unity. But yes, I think you're right. I think we may be quite some distance from that, and much further than I thought maybe 10 years ago. But maybe not. You know, maybe the fact that we can sit here and have this conversation is a sign that maybe that pendulum might stop swinging. You know, and once that happens, then I think some really beautiful, wonderful things will start to arise.
The real challenge is being confronted, like on the subway or in the street, and someone swearing at you for your race. That's the real challenge.
It's horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Does that happen to you?
No, but that's what I fear.
I know. And I know people who have been racially attacked. I've had good friends in New York that were attacked right after Trump was elected, in that period before he took the White House. There were so many mosques getting attacked and burned. But it's not only race, it's all of the high school shootings and all of this violence that seems so rampant. But the good thing is that it's so in your face that hopefully I can't be the only one.
Sorry?
I can't be the only one. It's like John Lennon, another mystic. John Lennon wrote the song Imagine. You know, imagine all the people living all as one. You know, imagine there's no religion, imagine there's no possessions, imagine there's no countries, imagine there's no beliefs. And that's the idea of that song, is to see the humanity shining through beyond all of that, past all of that. And I can't be the only dreamer, you know. There must be more of us. And eventually, I do believe that eventually we will all come together and see that this is the insanity of it all. You know? But it goes back to that identification. Racism comes from people identifying with their race, and then having the false idea that that race is better than other races, simply because they were born that way, which is so ridiculous and so it's just ridiculous that even still exists in this day and age. It's insanity. Nationalism, I think, is a real problem, because I think nationalism fuels that. You know, my country is right and your country is wrong just because I was born in this country. And we have parades and we fly flags and we shoot fireworks in the name of nationalism. We go to war in the name of nationalism. Again, Einstein, who said that nationalism is society's cancer. And I think that's a real problem. So I think I shudder sometimes. I had a conversation with some friends about that pendulum. Oh, it's going to swing back to the left eventually, and it probably will. We saw that in this recent midterm election in America. A lot of liberals were elected. Wonderful, wonderful. But when does the pendulum stop swinging? You know, that's really, because I think many of those liberals and many of the campaigns that were run were done out of anger and egoism. And I'm going to show you, and our politics are wrought with ego. And the pendulum will just keep swinging back and forth until that ends. And that's how we got from Obama to Trump. It's so clear. It's so clear, because when the liberals took, see, there's my identification again. I'm identifying with the liberal side, you know. So I myself have to always be on guard with those identifications. But the liberal ideology took from George Bush, who ran the country into the ground and took us to war, a ridiculous war. And the liberals went back. We had this huge landslide victory, took to the streets singing "We Shall Overcome" and parades in Obama's name, but all steeped in ego. There was this real air of vengeance, that we have taken this back, you know, air, and that's poison. We'll never stop swinging back and forth until we recognize that. So let's hope. Let's hope. Recognizing spirit in each other.
Like what Michelle said, if they go low, we go high.
What's that?
Michelle Obama.
She said what?
When they go low, we go high.
Well, the thing is, what we need to do is all go together. But right now it's challenging. There's such a divide.
Yeah, it's not just there, even in the Philippines.
Yeah, I know. And in Europe, with the Brexit movement, now it's coming out that the Trump Foundation funded a lot of the Brexit movement in Europe. I'm not surprised. You know, it comes from the same ideology. You know, that fear of the other. There is no other. That's the problem. There is no other. It's all we. But these identifications trap us in that mindset of I, other.
Isn't it similar to tribalism, identification?
Yeah, well, yeah, very much so. We identify with a tribe, and then our compassion, our love, is only capable of extending to that tribe. So we see the tribe as our family, our tribe, our loved ones, and then everyone else is other. We have no compassion. We totally objectify them. No compassion for the other. It'd be great to have a world tribalism. Yeah. So thank you for indulging me in that soapbox.
It's scary. It's just scary. It's scary.
To let go of identifications,
No,
or
just the way
what's
things
scary?
are.
The current state of.
Scary. Yeah.
Well, that's how we evolve. When what's behind us becomes less comfortable than what's in front of us, we move forward. And that's always been the case. On individual levels, when crawling no longer satisfies us, we learn to walk, right? And when walking very, shaking as a toddler, holding on to things no longer satisfies us, we learn to let go of the things and learn to be an adult. And so it happens on an individual level and on a communal level, worldwide. So, yeah, when the current state of humanity no longer satisfies humanity, we'll grow out of it. But it's, you're right, it's a very, how much more suffering do we need, you know, before we realize that?
I'm actually excited that I feel more and more people are awakening.
I agree. It is a shift in consciousness that's happening right now.
So
And
I
that
think
is
it's
the,
where you direct your attention.
yeah. No, you're right, and it's good bringing it back to the silver lining. The fact that the three of us can sit here and have this conversation, and there are many, many, many other people, and Einstein, who
The fact that
50,
you
60
have a
years
job
ago.
as a meditation teacher and that I have a center for healing.
I know,
It's very hopeful.
absolutely. There are a
Very,
lot
very
of signs that people like Eckhart Tolle can reach millions of people.
Oprah.
And on Oprah.
People love Oprah and her
Yeah.
messages of hope
Yeah.
and of love versus fear.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic. And like you said, we're so low, we can only go up. For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Or on that side of the pendulum, we can only go better towards the
I
light.
agree. I
That's
agree.
My soul focus.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I do what I do too. You know, is because I know that it's possible. If I can see it, anyone can see it. If I can see that the spirit shining through everyone, and anyone can see it. You know, and that's world peace. So yeah, it can happen. It can happen.
Do all mystics like get away from civilization like and go stay in a cave? Is that how they?
I hope I can.
All of them? Is
No.
that the history?
No, and I think
Why?
Jesus was a mystic. I would put Jesus in the category of being a mystic. And
He was in the desert for a while.
for 40 days. He
And
spent
Thomas
time
Merton
with
was
and
the
Thomas
same.
Merton. But Thomas Merton also taught and had students and taught
He did
priests.
spend time
He did
alone.
spend time. I think
Yeah.
solitude it makes it very easy to see your own shadow material, your own habits, your own projections, your own mind, your own ego. And once you really see that very clearly, and you see the poisons there, you can see it in others very clearly. And that's what I think, that's one of the qualities of a mystic, is to be able to see the traps that human beings fall into and say, oh, if you just go a little to the left or a little to the right, you won't need to do that anymore. and so I think time and solitude really helps that happen. Yeah. Tradition, the monks, Buddhist monks, that's a tradition for Buddhist monks to spend time in solitude, going on retreats, things like that. I crave it.
Did Gandhi do that too? Was he, did he do solitude?
I don't know if Gandhi went on silent or solitude retreats or silent
So
retreats.
that's a huge transformation for him.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't know much about Gandhi's training or upbringing like that. Yeah. Or Einstein. I don't know how much time alone Einstein spent. I kind of imagine he spent quite some time alone in his laboratory or running experiments and
No,
equations. I know he only slept 3 hours a night, or 3 hours at a time. He would sleep 3 hours periodically throughout days. He didn't keep a regular day-night schedule,
Really?
but he would sleep whenever he was tired for 3 hours.
No way.
Yeah. So,
I didn't know that.
yeah, which probably explains the hairstyle. Yeah. Yeah. Great discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.